Alrighty, we're on live, back with another episode, the Kobe episode, episode 24. We're not talking about any basketball here. It's more like the kind of late trends we've been discussing with the NFL. So, really excited about that. We're going to be talking about week three pieces and takeaways as we're geared up towards the season, and also the continuation from last week's episode. But this time we're keeping it open ended, talking about players we're really excited about to see this season in general. So it could be anywhere from like Pat Mahomes, like superstars like in the league, like veterans that we think are cast off that think are cast offs in the public eye, but we actually think they might have a significant role this season. And then like other guys like we're just genuinely excited to see. So without further ado, of course, John, how's everything going? Are you looking forward to this NFL season coming up next week?
Yeah, I'm doing good, chilling. But yeah, I'm excited for football to start. Obviously, I like fantasy football, and so as I get more teams there, I start getting more and more excited to watch these different guys play. And so, um, obviously excited for that. Hopefully, the Broncos play better this year than they did last year. Sean Payton should be better than Nathaniel Hackett, but yeah, overall, I'm just really excited for football to be back. Even though technically preseason has been going.
Yeah, I guess we'll find out week five what's going to happen
Hmm.
between Falcons and Jets. That should be a
Hmm.
must-see TV game. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, I think I'm about like five or six leagues this year for fantasy, and then
Hmm.
like including the dynasty league we just uh, initiated like lately. So a lot of leagues this year. I'm not used to being in that many. Really excited to see it. Um, but like you mentioned, I think there's a lot to look forward to because there's a lot of quarterbacks that are entering that are still like 27 and under, but like all their teams are considered contenders
Hmm.
because of their level of talent. I'm really excited to see that. And also, I'm really excited to see now that defenses are able to put a cap on the passing game a little bit. What is it going to look like further innovations? Because we saw like the commitment to the run game by the offense in response to that. So like, how does the defense mitigate that? Because you can make schematic changes to counteract that. That'll leave you with disadvantages in the passing game, or you can draft and develop certain prototype of guys. Like I think the reason for the running game came up because like the linebackers are smaller and like trying to stop the passing game with their quickness, but they lost power as a result of that. So then you could just run power and gap scheme plays. So I'm really excited to see like the schematic between that. Very specific, I know.
Hmm.
But as far as the week three preseason takeaways go, what kind of games did you see this past weekend? And then anything notable you want to point out?
Being a Broncos fan, obviously I watched the Broncos versus the Ram preseason game. The Broncos finished on a very high note, shutting out the Rams, which it's probably the first time in a couple of years that I've been truly happy as a Broncos fan. But but I mean, like the Broncos, they looked good across the board. I feel like their depth has played better in each preseason game, which made me pretty excited to kind of see how they do this year. But obviously, Jaleel McLaughlin, he made the 53-man roster, which I was pretty excited about. I know a couple guys got released or waived, traded that I was kind of bummed to see go. But overall, I think this is a pretty solid Broncos roster. I like more or less a lot of the players they have. I know IR moves still have to come through to re-sign players and whatnot, but I think the Broncos got a pretty good team there. Um, I think the Rams, on the other hand, well, I mean, it's still preseason, so I don't really hold things too, I guess, like hold these feelings too strongly in terms of like how good the team is. Um, the backups and the depth for the Rams seems a little bit more questionable. Obviously, getting shut out isn't an ideal look for your team, especially in the last week of preseason. And so I think if injuries were to happen for the Rams, like I mean they do with every team, I think the Rams might be in pretty big trouble in terms of just who is going to be that next guy to take the starting spot when a guy like Cup gets hurt, like guy like Stafford gets hurt, even if Aaron Donald gets hurt, like who's going to be there to make plays for the team if the depth's already pretty weak.
Yeah, great points there. I looked at the Bears and the Bills game, um, being a Bears fan, obviously, to start there. I looked at a couple other ones, but as far as like the Bears game, I think two Bears players that really stood out to me, like that I saw the most, were Tyson Bagent and Tyreek Stevenson, at the cornerback for the Bears. But Bagent's like completely taken over that second quarterback spot, which is
Mhm,
unbelievable. They cut PJ Walker, who they just signed this offseason.
mhm,
Um, like to back up Justin Fields. And then now all of a sudden, like they even cut Nathan Peterman. They plan to put him on the practice squad. But that just leaves Tyson Bagent backing up Justin Fields. And he's absolutely showed out the past two preseason games. It's been unbelievable. Kept it simple. Kept it simple in the scheme of things, but like he's shown he can create. He's not afraid. He has moxie. And I like that for my backup quarterback. Like be decisive. Like don't try and end the game. And even on the interception, I love how he went into detail with the press conference and said like why did that interception occur, like miscommunications, how do we correct the miscommunications so they don't happen as often. I really like that because it shows like he's not afraid to talk about what actually happened in the play and keep it general, like oh just a bad read on my part and let it go. Like
mhm,
it's very actionable on his part to like be specific in the kind of goals that he's striving for to correct that. And for Stevenson, it's he has a lot of highs and a lot of downs. Like it's kind of like what to expect from a typical rookie this upcoming NFL season. Don't expect him to be like a Justin Jefferson. Like not everybody's like that as far as like production. Um, and Stevenson had a lot of highs with great interceptions. Like last week, I like in week two, like he just had a tip ball that just slipped through his fingers, but he would have picked that off. And then against the Bills, he picked off a pass, which is
mhm,
just awesome to see. But then you also see plays where he's giving up a lot of yardage. Um, he's having issues tackling. So it's just like a process where you want to see you want to see him be a little bit better in like the pass coverage, especially, um, and clean up the tackling. But I think those are two players like that are adding to the foundation of what the Bears are building to keep an eye
mhm. Yeah, and I saw a couple minutes of that Bears game, and honestly, DJ Moore looks fantastic. Like,
on. Oh, yards after the catch freak, man. He was amazing.
yeah, I think that Bears offense really has potential to cook this year. With obviously, Justin Fields, he's a playmaker, regardless of I think what's going on around him. But DJ Moore, I mean, we saw that with his career with the Panthers, even though it was maybe the numbers that we'd hope to see from a first round receiver. You know, his just playmaking ability is pretty phenomenal, and obviously, there's always question marks when you switch teams and whatnot. And so I think that the fact that he's still playing great, even though it's preseason, he's still making plays, which I'm really excited for, especially as a Justin Fields quarterback fantasy owner. So, but yeah, I think
Hey,
the
I don't
Bears
blame
have
you.
Bears have really high potential this year, which I'm excited for. um, Actually, I think the Steelers' offense has looked good just throughout the entire preseason. I think Kenny Pickett has like the highest uh, quarterback rating or some type of quarterback stat, I think, of all quarterbacks in the preseason, which obviously, again, it's still preseason, but it's really nice to see him looking like he's taken steps forward. And I mean, just in the games in general, he played good. And I know you mentioned what Jalen Warren was looking pretty good as well for the Steelers. And so I think that the Steelers might be a better team than maybe people initially thought at the start of the offseason.
Yeah, we talked about it off air on Jalen Warren a little bit, and I was really impressed by him. Actually, my brother had brought me attention. He's like, "Oh, Jalen Warren's looking really good," um, and I'm just looking at how many carries he's had, and looking at what Najee Harris has done. Like, obviously, Najee's a starter, but I think there's a case to be made that like if you want that counterpunch or you want that guy like change of pace, like Jalen Warren can bring that and then some. He's like a classic example of like guys who might take a little bit longer than like the public eye to develop. And I
Hmm.
think that's what's happening to him right now, where he's like a capable backup now.
Hmm.
And that's all you can ask for. So um he could easily have a role where he can take all the passing down work in the offense and a third of the early down work,
Hmm.
and both he and Najee Harris could. still be very productive for the Steelers
Mhm.
offense. So I think it's only a
Mhm.
positive for them. And then another guy I want to talk about from that Steelers team is Calvin Austin the third. Um, I didn't expect this because they had a lot of receivers in the Browns. Um, I'm glad I have him deep in my dynasty roster. One of those guys I targeted for development, but I didn't think it was going to happen this soon. But he's already starting with the Steelers, so I think it's super impressive. And like even if it's from the slot, um, like I can see him like thrive in a way where he'll be a Rondo Robinson plus. So I think it'd be huge if he's able to start. Um, I'm going to be talking about some other receivers on the Steelers later, but I think it's a good sign to see him getting those reps
Mhm.
because they're shown they want to give him a pension to get some experience with Pickett and then the first team.
Mhm. Yeah, and then just another game that I guess we could talk a little about is the Jaguars Dolphins. I know you caught a little bit of it. I caught a little bit of it. But yeah, I think I don't know. Jaguars, like we predicted earlier, look like a really good team right now. Obviously, I think the big play or big thing that everybody, besides the injury, the big thing that everybody was talking about was the Calvin Ridley catch that looked incredible. It doesn't look like he's lost a step at all, which I know is everyone is questioning like, will it take some time for him to get used to playing football? Will he kind of be rusty on some of his routes? But he looks extremely fresh. He looks like he's ready to be a dominant, top 10 type receiver in the NFL, which is not good for division rivals or just the NFL opponents in general. So it's that. And then obviously, I think Jaguars in general have just really good depth. Just from their whole preseason kind of games that I've seen in general. Obviously, their backup quarterback. I don't know who. I know they had CJ Beathard or whatever, and uh, I think Nathan Rourke or something like that as their two backups. I don't remember if they kept both of them or not, but both of them look pretty solid in uh, preseason, especially in this Dolphins game, um, which I guess helps with the trusting the coaching process. If the scheme's good for literally every quarterback on that roster, you just know that a good quarterback like Trevor Lawrence is gonna really excel in this system. And we kind of saw it at the end of last year too. But I think that that was big, and obviously Tank Bigsby. I think he's played well both in this game and in literally all the other preseason games, and I've seen him climbing up a bunch of fantasy rankings and just player rankings in general, which is exciting for him.
Yeah, absolutely. I took a look at their depth chart. Right now, they have CJ Beathard. So I don't know
Okay.
if it's really updated. Like, obviously, the 53-man rosters that just recently be finalized. So there's a lot of time before the start of the season for changes to be made. But yeah, I agree. Jaguars look like they're right up there with the Chiefs, Bengals, and Bills as far as firepower. Now it's just you want to see it on a more consistent basis to be put in that spot. But I love what I see from Calvin Ridley, but I don't think Christian Kirk's going anywhere
Hmm.
like anyhow. I still think it's going to be like a 1A 1B situation
Hmm.
where sometimes Ridley's the 1A, but sometimes Kirk is the 1A, and their roles just flip. Like maybe Kirk is 1B to Ridley's 1A 1 week, and then it's vice versa. Um, I think Christian Kirk is like a lot of people clowning for his contract, but I think in the situation he's in right now, he could easily be the leading receiver on the team as well. And then
Hmm.
don't forget about Zay Jones. So I think it just goes to show you like how like each weapon from the receiver's position is dangerous for them. ETN is dangerous anytime he's in space. Evan Ingram's improved his technical prowess, which is really good to see because that was the only missing part to his game pretty much. So I look at that wide receiver room in Jacksonville compared with Lawrence's development. Excited about that.
Hmm.
Similar to like the Kirk stuff, I don't think Dearness Johnson's going away because Bigsby did fumble it in a crucial situation that first possession. Um, and there's some work where I still believe Dearness Johnson is better in between the tackles than Bigsby at this stage of their careers. So I could see Bisbee have the initial like backup job, but if he struggles during the season, I wouldn't be surprised if like the Ernest Johnson takes up that role where it's like ETN is kind of like DeAndre Swift plus like you use him in the passing game and some interior running game stuff. So just to keep an eye out. But I think the Jaguars, regardless of what happens in those running back or wide receiver rooms, they're in a good spot. They have built enough depth where they can afford to make those changes and like not lose a beat.
Yeah, and I think Trevor Lawrence is definitely be the type of quarterback that can sustain multiple, relevant wide receiver, multiple relevant playmakers on the offense, which is really nice. Similarly to how the Chiefs have been in the past with Mahomes, where Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce are both premier assets to have in fantasy, or even now with Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle are both top tier talents. Devontae Smith and AJ Brown, plus Miles Sanders and Dallas Goedert on the single offense last year were phenomenal. So I think this is another one of those teams that you can really pick and choose a lot of these players that will probably have really good seasons, which uh, will be kind of cool to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Any other games you wanted to mention before um, we wrap up this topic? We can talk about some more. We got some time.
Yeah, I guess just one last thing could maybe be that Raiders and the Cowboys game. I know
Okay.
it seemed pretty lopsided. I mean, you look at the score, it's 31-16, but um, I think I think both teams looked pretty good out there. Obviously, I mean, like Will Greer, he was playing for the Cowboys, and it looks like he's probably going further down the depth chart with the new quarterback acquisition they just got. But I think that was a really nice showing from him. Plus, I just think that um, they got a really good look at a lot of different players on their team. Like I mean, Malik Davis, he's older, but and I think he's going to the practice squad. But it's they're able to kind of test out guys like that. And on the Raiders side, obviously Aiden O'Connell's the big name there, and obviously he's going to be backing up this season to Jimmy Garoppolo. But I think it was really nice to see kind of just how he's playing, plus just how I guess the Raiders' overall scheme looks. So I think the Raiders and the Cowboys can both be pretty enticing teams to follow this year. I mean, just looking at this game, it seems like there are some things that are going right for both of them, which I guess is good for their fans.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really excited about Trey Lance to the Cowboys. I don't think, I mean, I still think Dak has some stuff to prove. But I always consider like Lance like a top three like QB prospect behind Fields and Lawrence. Um, and I think he just got put in a bad spot. So like that's my quick disclaimer, quick take on that. We'll have more discussions on that in the YouTube shorts this week. On the thoughts of the Trey Lance being moved to the Cowboys. But I guess my question is, I don't have any question about Aiden O'Connell. Sorry, um, long day, but he's proven enough, I think, to be
Mhm.
like even the starter on that team. And obviously, he still has to develop like from rookie year, but I think he's capable of starting on that team and executing what McDaniels wants to get done. But my question is more on like the tight end room for Dallas. Did you feel like there's somebody who stood out in that preseason game? If you paid attention to that spot.
Um, I mean, I guess from the tight end game, I mean they gave Shoemaker a couple looks, which
Okay.
I think. I mean, with the final preseason game, I know a lot of starters weren't playing, so this could also mean that Jake Ferguson has at least the starting job right now. And I know I mentioned it before, like maybe last week, but or just off camera, I don't remember. But I do think that Ferguson probably has the job locked up for maybe a year, maybe 2 years at most. I think he's just a good average player, which especially when you have so many playmakers on the Cowboys already, it's not like you need, an immediate superstar at tight end right now, and especially if Shoemaker can develop in 3 years or so. I think that that'll be a perfect timeline for Shoemaker to, be a sustainable tight end in the league. Like most tight ends, I think their breakout year is around that 3 to 4 year experience mark, which is tricky just because, that's around their second contract. But
Mm.
I mean, like what Travis Kelce, I don't think he got any meaningful play time until he was 25 years old. Mark Andrews, I think, broke out around 24, 25 years old. And so I think that just with the fact that Ferguson is a little bit older, he's only in his second year, I think. So he's still young already. But I think just having that year experience uh, leads me to think that he has the starting job for now. And then just the Cowboys fans that I've talked to and just kind of Cowboy forums that I read, it seems like Jake Ferguson has the initial starting job for the Cowboys tight end spot. But um, I don't know. We'll see how it turns out. Just they have a lot of talent elsewhere, so I don't think that their tight end room is the most, I guess, on top of the list of issues that they want to make sure are resolved before the season starts.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, even if they can get like Dalton Schultz, like they're like 80% of Dalton Schultz production,
Mhm.
I think that's value for that room. So, um, yeah, I think that's a situation that's a little bit unresolved for that team. Trying to
Mhm.
figure out like which tight end at the end of my drafts should to be
Yeah.
targeting, but no, it's I that sounds about right. Like I noticed a lot of scheme looks for Shoemaker from Greer. Like said, that connection seems strong in the preseason, but at the same time, like all Ferguson has to do is like his job and then zone and man
Mhm.
to like cover that role.
Mhm.
And yeah, not all. I agree with a lot with what you said about tight ends. Not all of them develop like on a linear path. Like TJ Hawkinson, I think had a breakout second year in the league. Like Kyle Pitts had a really good rookie season, but
Mhm.
like that's not common. Usually takes a
Yeah.
couple minutes. Like look at Darren Waller when
Mhm.
he broke out on the Raiders. Like nobody was thinking about him. Like they were just
Mhm.
thinking about how AB like sparing the team. But then it didn't matter when Waller like came really good.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
but development is not linear. It happens like when you least expect it. But on that note, we're going to be talking about players we're really excited to see this season. Like players we think we're going to break out, players that we think are going to be record breakers. So really excited to talk about this one because I'm not sure who you're keeping your eye on the most this season
Mhm.
or who you really want to see.
Mhm.
And last episode we kind of kept it to just guys who just started out or like second years who like didn't have the
Mhm.
rookie season they wanted, but we could expect better things or like players to build off of from their rookie
Mhm.
season. This one's more open ended, like I mentioned at the top
Mhm.
of the podcast. Um, Guys, any number of years of experience, who do you think is going to break out? Um, have record breaking season? Um, any of that sort. You can start with one player, wax
Mhm.
poetic about them, and then we can go from there.
Yeah. I think one player that I don't know if he'll have like a superstar type here, but I think he'll take a big step forward is Mac Jones with the Patriots.
Okay.
Um, and I think a big part of this is maybe like I don't know. I just feel like the Patriots offense may be a bit more efficient this year than last year. I know they literally they cut Bailey Zappi. I don't know how his last name is, and they cut or waived Malik Cunningham as well to cut down to their 53-man roster. And so technically they only have one quarterback. They'll probably bring in someone like Colt McCoy or bring maybe back one of those guys. But I think just that those cuts in general kind of speak to the vote of confidence that Belichick and maybe just the other coaches within the organization have with Mac Jones in terms of we're not going to have some young uh, quarterback behind you to kind of I guess put like scare you into thinking that you're really on a short leash or something like that. Because obviously when Zappi played last season, everyone started talking about is Zappi the next Tom Brady for the Patriots, and there's been talks that Belichick likes him more than he likes Mac Jones, but I think that just the cuts there is a huge, I guess, vote in confidence for Mac Jones that he can, take the next step forward. Plus, I do like the offensive pieces they have. Ramondre Stevenson's coming back. Ezekiel is joining the team, and I think he's multiple years removed from his prime playing days, but he's still an elite pass blocker as a running back, and he's still good at short goal line carries or just short yardage situations in general. And
Third
so
and ones, like goal line. Yeah, I hear
Mhm.
you on that.
Yeah, and so I think that will kind of help, Ramondre Stevenson's longevity as well in terms of just him being an elite playmaker, just in all different situations. And so I think that plus just there's a handful of just receivers, both young and old, on the team that I think were really built to create a solid system around Mac Jones. And so I think that he's a player that could have one of those maybe high 3,000s, lowish 4,000 yard type seasons with in the mid to upper 20s in the touchdown range, which I think would be a huge step up for him in terms of playing.
Yeah, and I'll just throw some stats like as you were talking about him. Um, Obviously, last year wasn't his finest season. He had third worst passing grade out of all the quarterbacks who took at least 100 dropbacks. Um, Whereas, like in his rookie season, he was eighth highest passing grade under pressure. So I think that's important to know because when you're talking about plays he wasn't pressured in, like on 71% of his dropbacks, he had a completion percentage of 71% and 11 touchdowns to three picks. So like in a clean pocket, this guy is really, really good. Like
Hmm.
he has the time, he can execute. And I think it's more for a situation where like New England's always had a great offensive line, and I don't think they had it or like knew how to use it with a quarterback.
Hmm.
Like whenever you want a quarterback to be successful, you want to tailor it. Um, First of all, you want to have a running game, right?
Hmm.
Because that makes it easier if you have a quarterback execute a 3rd and 3 rather than a 3rd and 8 or longer. And then on top of that, you want to marry like the routes to what the quarterback does best, and also like block so like he has the time to get who through like 2 or 3 progressions. So Mac is like one of those guys where like he needs like 2 or 3 progressions to like really find the right guy, and he needs a system in place. And I think Bill O'Brien's going to bring stability to that. So
Hmm.
fair answer. Um, it's all going to depend on the blocking. I like the weapons they've added
Hmm.
with Keishawn Butte, and there's one more receiver that's slipping the top of my head right now who, not Smith Schuster. I think he's productive, but like, um,
They
I gotta
have
take a look at their depth chart.
uh what's his face? They got the guy from the Dolphins, I know, from a couple of years ago,
Right.
Devontae
Oh,
Parker.
Devontae Parker. Yeah, he's pretty good too. But I'm also really intrigued by Demario Douglas. The
Hmm.
way they've been using him in camp and preseason. He's a really quick guy.
Hmm.
Like I'm not saying he's Tyreek Hill, but like you can use him on some of the plays that Tyreek Hill has succeeded in. And if you think about like the rest of the type of their weapon, you got Juju Smith-Schuster, who's like a big slot option. Devontae Parker, you can use him on the boundary, but like he's kind of like an Alshon Jeffrey plus when he was like on the Bears and Eagles, kind of. So like that's it's good. It's good to have him, but like
Hmm.
3rd and 8, you're not looking for him to win with quickness, like a route runner or
Hmm.
something. That's not Devontae Parker's game. And so like you're looking for Butte to develop, and then like obviously Demario Douglas, like I mentioned, and
Hmm.
then when Tyquan Thornton gets back from injury, he's going to add another speed element to his offense. So I just think they have more pieces to help him out, personnel wise and
Hmm.
system wise, where that's fair and valid.
Hmm.
Um, One guy I'm really excited about, and I think he's just completely written off, is Allen Robinson this year. Like
Hmm.
he is 2 years removed from leading the Bears like receiving corp and like having 1,000, 1,200 yard season. Be like, oh, if only Allen Robinson had a QB. Like, what
Hmm.
were we all saying about that? And then last year was the first season he did with Matthew Stafford, and like things just went horrible for that entire Rams team.
Hmm.
So I think going into Pittsburgh, he's in a much better situation. He's in an ascending quarterback situation with a much better coach, much better defense, better surrounding cast around him.
Hmm.
Like, and there's no pressure on him to be like a 1,400 yard
Hmm.
receiver anymore. I think he's still capable of hitting like 800 to 900 yards because he doesn't win on athletic ability. He wins on route running and timing.
Hmm.
And I think those skills aren't going to diminish.
Yeah, I think that he is an interesting player to look at this year. Um, yeah, I do think that I guess the one tricky thing with him is he is, you know, on the older side for receivers. He's around that age where they like regression really starts to hit receivers, which is not ideal, especially for his, like, I guess, lack of playing over the last couple seasons, or lack of, I guess, big playmaking over the last couple years. But yeah, I don't know if he can reach that 8 to 900 yard mark, just especially with just all the other pieces in that Steelers offense. But I do think that he can make, a valuable contribution to that receiving game. Like, he could be like, maybe the third highest yardage kind of guy on that team, which I still think would be pretty great. But like, even if that is 600-ish yards, and he's like that maybe third highest yardage guy on that offense, I think that'll still be a pretty solid season. Obviously, for fantasy, it's less than optimal, but from being an NFL player standpoint, I think that's a really good look for him to have.
Yeah, and that's perfectly valid because if you look at the weapons on the roster, Fryermuth's a piece. Deontay Johnson, when he can reliably fix his hands, he's clearly like a
Mm-hmm.
number one option. Pickens showed and flashed like numerous times last season, and then he got Najee Harris. So like,
Mm-hmm.
like he can like Allen Robinson can easily be the fifth option on that team. He could easily be the second or first option on that team. It really depends
Mm-hmm.
on like how he does in this age 30 season. But
Mm-hmm.
I think for this 1 year, I think he can like he has enough in the tank to like lead a team in receiving.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's definitely capable of that. It's like one of those situations where you don't want to write off a player too soon, and I think many people are doing that with him.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I I just have a good feeling he's gonna have
Mm-hmm.
like 700 to 800 yards, if not more, and I wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
be shocked by it. Um, who's another guy you've been excited to see? We got one for the
Um,
quarterback spot, but if we want to dive down quarterback again, totally fair. Want to do a different position? That's fine too.
um, see, I mean, I know I kind of touched on this multiple weeks, I think, but
That's fine.
um, that
Hammer it home.
Washington, yeah, that just the whole Commanders offense is looking really good to me. Obviously, I think that Jahan Dotson himself, he could really cement himself as one of the premier receivers in the NFL this upcoming season. I mean, when he's been on the field, we've seen him as an extremely dynamic playmaker that defenses really have to go and scheme for, I think. You follow that up with, I think, Terry McLaurin, who's, I think he's just like, he's going to be another Brandon Cooks, I think, in terms of every year he's going to put up really good numbers, but because of just, I don't know, his lack of team success, he's just kind of forgotten about a lot. Whereas like Brandon Cooks, he's had like 1,000 yards, I think, every year in his career, except I think last year. And like that's a pretty insane stat to have, but like no one ever talks about Brandon Cooks as a good like as a really good receiver. And so I think Terry McLaurin kind of follows that kind of I guess tier of wide receiver in my opinion, but I think that Jahan Dotson really puts uh them on the team is like the offense on the map. I think what Brian Robinson, I think he is going to just continue playing pretty good football. I know they got Antonio Gibson. We'll see how the offense is schemed there. And like I mean, I think a big part of this is their new guy running the offense with Eric Bieniemy. I think it'll be interesting to see how he does. Like, is he only getting signed just because of Andy Reid, or does he actually have pretty good offensive an offensive line to I guess lead an offense to being very successful? Because I feel like we've seen how their other offensive coordinator Matt Nagy turn out with the Chicago Bears, and everybody his first season as well he won offensive or not offense he won the coach of the year, I think.
Close to the year. Yep.
And everyone's talking about how he's like the next big time head coach in the NFL, and now he's back as some offensive. Yeah, I think he got promoted back to the offensive coordinator for the Chiefs, but I think it'll be a big test to see if Bieniemy will kind of change that, or if from here on out every offensive coordinator from the Bears is or not the Bears from the Chiefs is going to be it's just the Andy Reid guy, so we're not going to have him as a head coach, but. Yeah, and so I think just with the new coaching there, plus uh, just what we've seen in the past, Sam Howell looked really good this preseason. I think that just the whole offense will play even just a little bit better, and I think that we'll see one or two guys really, really make a name for themselves. Whether it be Terry McLaurin having an extremely good season, maybe like a 1,500 yarder type year, or we see someone like Brian Robinson, we see someone like Jahan Dotson, even Curtis Samuel kind of have a further breakout year this upcoming season.
I'm really excited for Brian Robinson. Um,
Hmm
he's another guy I wasn't thinking of when we first planned this episode, but now I think about it, I think his situation last year was so like it was not ideal. Like he got
hmm
shot first of all, and then was expected to come in like retain that muscle mass he lost, and like instantly take the number one spot, and then like play like a breakout rookie. And I think he's getting overlooked a little bit right now too. And wouldn't be surprised if he leads the team in rushing and like even if he hits like the top 12 or 15 backs because he's capable of that talent. It's just haven't been seen yet. And like a lot of it's riding on how well does Howell do,
hmm
right? It all depends on how Howell does, like because that's going to affect the entirety of that offense. Um, I like what you mentioned about the coordinators because I think in like Nagy's case, there's some guys who are really good, and even like Vic Fangio, I feel like there's a good argument for this too.
hmm
Some guys are really, really good as coordinators, but like overall coaches, like that part changes because your responsibilities change. Like it's more media,
hmm
it's more like system level, like understanding the entire organization, entire team, trying to tie 53 people together, not just offense. And like guys are really good at scheming people open or like putting them in the best, like exotic calls, like calls where you're like, oh, that dude's a genius.
hmm
But does that dude know how to lead a team? Like I think that gets lost sometimes. So that's a fair point on Bieniemy. I think the one thing going for Bieniemy is he's coached multiple different offenses, like with the Chiefs, like
hmm
the Chiefs with Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, Chiefs without Tyreek Hill. Um, even before like they had Mahomes, like he's been in that forefront and he's grown.
hmm
So I think from that, like what he's learned okay, there's ways you can call plays to fit your personnel. And I
hmm
think for a team like Washington, that's going to help like guys like Sam Howell a lot.
hmm
So good take on that one. You got me. You added an extra guy. I'm going to add a guy who won MVP before, but
hmm
if you've been listening to this podcast very carefully, um, you hear me wax poetic about the Ravens offense and how like Todd Monken being added to the fold is going to help Lamar Jackson's development as a passer and let the public realize his like that he can pass the ball.
hmm
So I think just that team with what they've done to add in weapons, and you think about the start to the offseason, we're like, oh, do they really value Lamar like that? He doesn't have an agent. Like, how is he going to get his bag? We talked about it on the podcast, like about Lamar Jackson's situation, and I just think the way he's handled that situation, and then like also what the Ravens have done to help him is gonna make him even more powerful. I think a lot of people are like excited about Justin Fields, myself included as a Bears fan, but like Lamar Jackson, like is capable of also rushing for 80 yards into the end zone all by himself. Then now you just added him three weapons almost with like Bateman, hopefully coming back from injury, Odell, a year and a half removed from injury. And then you got Zay Flowers. Everybody's raving about Zay Flowers this postseason. And then how could we forget his safety blanket? His number one option was a tight end. It was Mark Andrews.
hmm
Um, and then J.K. Dobbins, I've had high hopes on him. Gus Edwards, like they've been productive. And then I think they just got Latavius Murray, or they got a veteran back to help out in that room. But I just think that, and then like Munkin coming from Georgia and like really helping out Stetson Bennett and like elevate that offense and playing to their strengths. And the way he calls like vertical passing concepts and schemes guys open in the passing game, I think that's going to be a welcome change. And you're going to see how Greg Roman's system really limited Lamar Jackson as a
hmm
passer. So I'm really excited for him to prove the doubters wrong that he can't pass the ball or he's not an
hmm
effective passer. I think I think he's one of the highest like accurate passers in
Hmm.
college, and I think it might not turn out that way in the NFL like to that degree, but I think he's capable of 4,000 yards passing.
Hmm.
I really think so. Like, can
Hmm.
and I really think he could win MVP again. I think he could have 5,000 total yards, and I wouldn't blame.
Hmm. Yeah, Lamar. Yeah, I feel like it's almost easy. I feel like he's one of the most forgotten about MVPs of like as of recent, just because
Easily.
I
He
don't know.
hasn't won.
Yeah, and like just with the injuries with him, plus the injuries with the team, it's just I don't know. It's been a hard path for the Ravens, but yeah, I think that like literally anytime he's on the field, the Ravens are in a position to win, and I mean that speaks so much to just how skilled of a player Lamar is. I mean, like Justin Fields, I feel like can only hope to be like anywhere close to Lamar Jackson is right now, and so I think that's yeah, I think that they could have a really big year this year, especially like you're saying, like they have just a lot of added talent to the team that could really explode and elevate this team. Plus, Monk in there, but I guess hot take from me. I don't know how much of a hot take it is, but um, I say Jared Goff could be top three in pass yards this upcoming season.
I'm willing to do a bet with you on that, but I'm gonna
Hmm.
do a different player, and I think it'll be a fun exercise to see who ends up on top. I think
Hmm.
Derek Carr would be a top three passer in this league this year. He's next on my
Hmm.
list, and I was gonna give a long soliloquy
Hmm.
why. Um,
Uh-huh.
I think both those quarterbacks, I think, are gonna have like top five, top 10 explosive offenses. I think closer to top five. I think
Hmm.
people are sleeping on the Lions and the Saints because they don't
Hmm.
look at O line play that deeply. But if you
Hmm.
look at both those lines, I know Pete has not done well in this preseason, and just Pete, but that aside, I think both of them like have like enough depth in the weapons you're looking for in the team where you like the quarterback's not tied to like one receiver. If that receiver's shut
Hmm.
down, he's screwed. They both have great offensive coordinators. They both have multiple sets of weapons to be deep enough. So, um, you go ahead and bet on your Jared Goff. I'll stick with Derek Carr and see what happens.
Okay, here I'm just in my head. I'm doing a number. I'm adding up like what I think the numbers are.
Oh, projections.
Yeah, projections for like the different receivers on the team. Just a second,
Right.
if I can find them. Aha, here we
Yeah.
go.
So I while he's doing that, I can talk about like obviously the Lions in that situation. Like I was really high on Laporta. I talked about him last week. Um, but they have Amon-Ra St. Brown like on the field right now. Then you have Jameson Williams coming back, and they've only continued to add like receivers to that room. I think they did a great job, like really highlighting the running backs with Jimmy Gibbs and David Montgomery. I think they'll be a little bit more effective. Like I think Jamal Williams scoring like 17 or 16 touchdowns from the goal line. Um, is crazy. I don't think that's going to happen to David Montgomery's case, but I think he can approximate that. And then you add like veterans like Marvin Jones, like and Josh Reynolds to that situation. It was good. I had high hopes on Denzel Mims. It didn't work out, but I think with that, like you got enough weapons where like even Marvin Jones gonna have a 1,000 yard receiver, or like a 1,000 yard receiving, and like 900 yards or 800 or something like that. And like Jared
Hmm.
Goff can still like he could easily have 4,500 passing yard season. And then you look on the other side with Derek Carr, like he's got Olave, like easily like another rookie of the year candidate in a horrible quarterback situation last year. Then I got Michael Thomas coming back. Then you got Alvin Kamara. I think he's missing 3 games. But like even if you're missing 3 games, you got Jamal Williams and like Kendrick Miller, who I'm high on from the job. We talked about him during the running back drafts saga. Um, you got Foster Moreau, Jawan Johnson, those kind of guys. We talked about Rashid Shaheed a little bit, and how he did some really positive things. But basically, you got enough there, and with the like both teams have top five O lines. you have enough there to support it and like stable quarterback play where it's like Jared Goff went to the Super Bowl, man, and like Derek Carr was like an MVP consideration, like, and I know that was a long time ago, but like
Hmm.
you think about the coaches he's had, like John Gruden and how that went, and then Josh McDaniels and how that turned out, like and ended, and do you think about like the coach he's had now, who was there when he wasn't in an ideal situation? I think both these organizations have done a fabulous job team building, and
Hmm.
it'll be very interesting to see if we find out that both quarterbacks ended up tied for third in like quarterback rating, passing yards, and all those
Hmm.
metrics. But I'm willing
That
to do
would
a
be.
challenge on this season long to see
Hmm.
Jared Goff or Derek Carr who has a better season.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to see. But yeah, so here's I guess my receiving yard ish predictions, right? But I have in this Lions offense, I think that Amon-Ra St. Brown could have, another phenomenal season. He puts up 1,500 receiving yards this upcoming year, especially because
Wow.
uh, in the first portion of the season, I think he's going to get heavy targets, especially, with a young tight end plus no Jameson Williams. I think that he'll be targeted heavily and come off really, really strong with a bunch of, big scoring games. Um, I think the running back room combined gets around 800 to 850 receiving yards, especially just I think Jameer Gibbs receiving upside. Plus, I mean, we've seen David Montgomery play decently for as like in terms of
He can catch the
catching the
ball.
football. So I think 850 is a safe estimate, maybe a little hopeful estimate from there. But then I think Marvin Jones can put up maybe like a 700-ish yard season. Uh, then we get guy like maybe Jameis Williams with his season. He puts up 550 to about 600 yards this year with the missed games and whatnot, and just getting
Okay.
into things. I
They're
think,
like 3,500 now. Yep.
yeah. Then I have like their rookie tight end about 500, which
Okay.
for a good rookie tight end 4 to like 600 I think is about decent. I think so. I said 500 is pretty solid
That's
there.
amazing for a rookie tight end. Yeah.
Yeah, well, because I think what like uh Chig or whatever on the Titans, he had around 400 ish, I think, and then Greg Dulcich, I think, was around that 400-yard range. And I know
Yeah.
both of them didn't play the whole season, and so if you have a guy like Laporta starting the entire season, I think that him putting up around 500-ish receiving yards is pretty decent, especially just everyone talks about him like he's played really good in camp. He's had a pretty decent preseason and whatnot. He's coming in as the Lions starting tight end. And then I had, Josh Reynolds, maybe he puts up around 300, 350. And
Okay.
then maybe Khalif Raymond puts up like 100 to 200 receiving yards there. But I'd say like
Okay.
around that much. Maybe it's a little optimistic in some aspects, but I think that if this Lions offense is really firing at all cylinders, especially with how good their offensive line is, I think that this type of production is pretty feasible for this team. Especially, I mean, we've seen Jared Goff; he knows how to sling it. He can throw the ball good, especially when he has a clean pocket. And I think the Lions are one of the best teams to go to have a clean pocket. So, uh,
Right. Like I see you now. Like I see how you got to like 4,500 yards pretty easily for Jared Goff. Um,
mhm,
I think the only thing that might be outlandish is like Amon-Ra St. Brown hitting
mhm,
1,500 yards
yeah,
because like that is like you're like thinking he's gonna have a record breaking season like by his standards, by like most receiver standards.
mhm,
But even if he doesn't, I could still see
mhm,
like Jared Goff hitting like 1,500 yards, like because
mhm,
like who's to say that Jameer Gibbs like doesn't have like a revelation season where he's like Alvin Kamara 2.0,
mhm,
or let's say like Jameson Williams is the guy that ends up being that 1B when he comes on, and like he takes over for what like Amon Ross St. Brown was doing the first couple of
mhm,
games. So like there's multiple ways on how that could be spread out, but like for the most part, I think you presented a good avenue where he could flip with 4,500 yards.
mhm,
Like I think with the situation with like Derek Carr, you're looking at Olave. He just had an amazing season.
mhm,
Like I'm gonna chalk him up for 1,300 yards.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I'll keep it fair and put it like 1,100 yards because like he's gonna have a better quarterback, better surrounding cast. Like that's gonna
Mm-hmm.
help, and then that surrounding cast with Michael Thomas. Granted,
Mm-hmm.
the big question is injury, but up to this point, I think he's done enough where like you
Mm-hmm.
can be fine with him if you're still on the train for Michael Thomas.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm gonna be confident and put him up for 1,000 yards as a secondary
Mm-hmm.
receiver. That's
Yeah.
amazing for a secondary wide receiver. You're already looking at
Mm-hmm.
2,000 yards there, and then Rashid Shaheed, I think he could have like 600 yards, 700
Mm-hmm.
yards. I think I might be safe on that, but I could
Mm-hmm.
see him do that. And looking at almost sub like 300. Then Alvin Kamara, even missing 3 games, chalk him up for like 500, 600 yards, like himself. Like, and that could easily change. I'd probably just underselling that. I'm easily over like want to say good 3,300, not
Mm-hmm.
even counting the tight ends and then like the other weapons like that. So like when you add them all up, I think it'll be interesting. Like we're looking at 4,000 yard passers easily with their
Mm-hmm.
cast and the O lines, right? Um, so yeah, um, if there's two offenses to like invest in fantasy, and you're like, oh, I'm not going to get like the top quarterbacks like from the Bengals, from
Mm-hmm.
the Chiefs, and Cincinnati. But look out for the Lions and the Saints because I promise you they're
Mm-hmm.
probably being undervalued right now. Sans, St. Brown, and Olave.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, in terms of fantasy as well, I feel like you look at some of the league winners that we've seen in the past. I mean, like Kirk Cousins has been one of those guys that he's obviously not talked about as one of the premier quarterbacks in the league, but he puts up really good fantasy numbers. I mean, a guy that, in terms of fantasy talk, right, you get him pretty late compared to all the other premier quarterbacks, and you're getting a guy that has almost identical production to a guy like Patrick Mahomes, just when you're looking at the past maybe like year or two, in terms of from a passing standpoint. And then you see
Yeah.
guys like Matthew Stafford as well, like the year they won the Super Bowl. He was, I mean, in one of my leagues, I think I got him. I think I took the last quarterback that season
Starting
in my
quarterback.
league.
Yeah.
Yeah, the last starting quarterback, and I picked Matthew Stafford after people had already picked some of their backups as well, and Matthew Stafford was the guy that really led me far into the season. And so I think guys like Derek Carr, guys like again Kirk Cousins or Jared Goff, even Daniel Jones are the types of guys that aren't really the hottest commodities that we see a lot of quarterbacks nowadays go around 2, 3, 4 ish, and I think those are some of the guys here that we just mentioned that you could take a lot later than those guys and get pretty good value from.
Yeah. And I think this is like a classic argument when you're looking at Brian Tannehill breakout season on the Titans. And it's kind of like the quarterbacks we're talking about with Carr and like Jared Goff, like you mentioned with Kirk Cousins, like they're not like you're not gonna list them out as like top 10 QBs when you're first like
Hmm.
coming up with your list.
Hmm.
But I think like with the football being the team game, like there's more variables to it than that. And we're forgetting that they're humans too, where they could learn from like different experiences that they had at previous stops. Like maybe Jared Goff figured out a way where he could have been better from the past Super Bowl we lost. And like basically basically look into that situation like that. Um, one guy I really want to talk about before we end off today is Dalton Kincaid. I think he's fine for a rookie sensation. Like if there's one rookie I'm really hedging out on breaking out besides JSN, it's him. It's because I'm looking at how he's used in like the Bills offense, like what that offense is capable of, and how that offense is looking for a secondary option that's reliable if like Diggs is not there or like he's being taken away. And I just think the way he's being used this rookie season, like it's gonna signal breakout. Like
Hmm.
at worst, it's he's gonna be frustrating to deal with if you're like have Dawson Knox as your starter or like have him as your starter because there'll be weeks where like the Dawson Knox is still a good tight end. Like he's gonna have a couple touchdowns where it's just like, oh, that could have gone to Kincaid, or like, oh, wasn't. Knox primarily a blocker? Or like, why is Kincaid not on the field in these plays? So I look at Kincaid and be like, he could be using enough passes where like you see him being detached from the line of scrimmage. You see him being used in the slot, like as a mismatch. And I think he's going to be one of those guys where NFL circles are going to be like, why did we wait on this guy? He's basically the next coming of Kelsey.
Hmm.
I'm not saying he is Kelsey, but like I'm just saying his receiving talent is like it's not been seen in a while, like not including Kyle Pitts.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's it's a good pick to have. I mean, literally, again, from all the camp, all the preseason, there's been so much hype around him. I think him and Laporta have been the two that have received ridiculous amounts of hype in terms of their, I guess, day one readiness. We'll actually see how day one ready they are once the NFL season actually starts, but yeah, I think those two are looking good. And then I know I mean, Musgrave has slowly been rising in terms of some hype in terms of rookie tight ends. So maybe it's kind of those three as kind of the big name tight ends this year. I mean, so many tight ends got drafted in the first 2 rounds this year. So literally any combination of them could be successful. But um, yeah, again, most tight ends do take like 2 to 3 years to really, become NFL ready. But I think that Kincaid really is one of those tight ends that potentially could be, day one game record, which will be pretty exciting to see.
You got one last guy?
No, I think I covered most of the guys I wanted to talk about today, so I'm happy
Okay.
with that. But yep,
Well, that's it for me as well, guys. If you liked our topics today, leave a note down in the description, or you wanted to hear like different topics and like different guys you want to cover. Please let us know. We got some downtime in between now and the start of the season. We're recording on this on a Wednesday, August 30th. So with the NFL season coming up, we're more than a week away. We plan to cover a Chiefs and the Lions preview predictions, and then like other week like notable week one games that we'll be watching next week. So really stay tuned for that. I think it'll be very exciting. You'll start to see like how we kind of break down these games and like what we're looking for, without like overreacting to like, oh, what if the
hmm
Chiefs get blown out week one? We'll really dive into like maybe the why they get blown out or like what needs to be fixed. But with that, follow us on Instagram. You can follow us at in the description on that banner where it says amon.a.mission. Um, like, comment, subscribe. If you guys have anything at all you would like us to talk about in future episodes, let us know. We'd be more than happy to consider it. We'll love to talk football, talk other sports as well. And with that, peace out.
yep. Peace.